Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am an adrenal fatigue recovery ninja, and today I'm doing this impromptu adrenal fix video live because I had to swing by the office and pick up my computer charger, and I noticed there were a couple of questions on my Facebook group page that I hadn't answered, and I wanted to answer it in a live session. I know many of you may not be watching this live, but once the video is done, then you can watch it over and over and over again. So it was posed by Kathy Weiss, and she asked about her homocysteine levels. Her homocysteine levels in 2008 were 8.0, and since then she's got it down to 5 to 6.0, and she wants to know if that's a risk for clotting, and then she also wants to know if there are adrenal supplements she should be avoiding, like pregnenolone and others. So there's a lot of things going on in that question that don't have anything to do with each other directly, and there's a lot of incorrect assumptions in there as well. So let's talk about that and dissect that and get into that, and hopefully we can have some value for you, Kathy. So the first thing is 8.0. So is that a good level or not? You know, I don't know why someone would have told you in 2008 that 8.0 was extremely high. What we find actually is 7 to 9 is the actual acceptable levels for homocysteine. So you were at 8.0, and I would have said in 2008 at 8.0 that wouldn't have been a problem. On lab results, they typically show 0 to 15 as the ranges, 0 to 15. I mean, to me, that's ridiculous. I've never seen anyone below 0, so no one would be flagged on the low end. And I do believe 10, 11, 12 is starting to get high homocysteine levels. But here's the thing. There's no way to specifically know unless you do a methylation profile, and there are tests that do it. Doctors Data does a methylation profile. They're expanding their test. Health Diagnostic Research Institute does a complete methylation profile, and it's really, really complete in terms of looking at all the different B vitamins, looking at methionine, looking at homocysteine, looking at cystathionine, looking at glutathione reduced and not reduced, looking at SAM-SAW ratio. I know I'm speaking alphabet soup to you, but I will show you what that means in a second when we come over to my pathway planner. But either way, so the first thing is, Kathy, the assumption is wrong. I think that 8.0, it could be blocked, meaning methylation is not working properly. And what happens sometimes, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have an iron deficiency anemia, and typically that means your red blood cells are going to be low, or the size of the red blood cells are going to be smaller, because iron really makes those red blood cells bigger because there's more stuff to carry. And then on the flip side, let's say you also had a B12 deficiency, and so again, red blood cells would be low, but your red blood cells would tend to be bigger because B12 makes the cell more mature, and they get smaller when they mature. So on the one hand, you're going to have big red blood cells because of low B12, and on the other hand, you're going to have low or small red blood cells because of iron. So you're kind of being pulled in two directions. In the one direction, because of low B12, your blood cells get bigger, and in the other direction, because of low iron, they get smaller. And there's no rule to say if you have a macrocytic anemia, you can't have a microcytic, or if you have a microcytic anemia, you can't have a macrocytic. You can have both. And what's happening is the red blood cell size would look normal, meaning you have a process that's making it look big, and you have a process that's making it look small, and it's actually normal, and you can conclude that there's nothing wrong with it. So you'd have to go deeper. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? There are processes that can make your homocysteine rise and processes that make your homocysteine go lower, which we'll talk about in a couple moments. And that's going to create a normalized homocysteine, like maybe what you have, 8.0, and you would assume that it's normal. But in this case, you were told it's high. So I think there was a mistake there. I don't know what happened. But I would say I would look at other things. The other question I would say is something that you may have a little bit misguided is in terms of risk factors for clotting. Because homocysteine levels are high, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be a higher risk for clotting per se. It's going to be a higher risk for cardiovascular events. Like homocysteine being high is more of a problem for arterial sclerosis and cardiovascular events, not necessarily clotting per se. So I don't know where the relationship between clotting and high homocysteines are not a one-to-one. Now I'd have to research studies and see if there's a positive correlation between high homocysteine and high clotting. But my guess is that you can have more of a clotting genetic predisposition, and that's not necessarily going to mean homocysteine is going to be high or low. So there again is another misconception or sort of connection between the two. Although the higher the homocysteine, the higher the cardiovascular concerns, the higher the inflammation concerns, the more concerned you are about making energy and repairing your cells and repairing tissues and fighting off infection and making hormones and making neurotransmitters and detoxing, but not necessarily clotting per se. And then the last thing you have here is there adrenal supplements that I should be avoiding? So you kind of made the leap just to it's all adrenals, and the adrenals are causing the homocysteine, which is 8.0, which isn't high, to be too high, and are you a risk factor for clotting, which is not necessarily the risk factor for clotting. So where the adrenals fit in is the more stress we have, the more it places demands on our homeostatic systems, meaning having to balance dealing with stressors, making sure that our blood pressure stays normal, making sure our temperature stays normal, making sure that the hormones are balanced, making sure we're settling down inflammation, making sure we're stabilizing our electrolyte balance, making sure we have energy through the day. That doesn't necessarily mean if I take too much adrenals, it's going to cause my homocysteine to go higher or low. Adrenal supplements, it could, but I wouldn't be asking that question as which supplements should I be taking for my adrenals, or should I not be taking that's going to impact my homocysteine. So there's a lot of connections and reductionistic approaches with those questions, which I don't blame you for. I blame most doctors that say, hey, take this pill and you can lower your blood pressure and we don't have to worry about anything else. Or take this supplement, it can lower your glucose and we don't have to worry about anything else. Or take this pill, you can lower your cholesterol and we don't have to worry about anything else. Or let's just cut out your fibroids, let's just cut out your gallbladder, let's just cut out these things and we don't have to worry about anything else. It doesn't work that way. The body works as a system, and you have to be able to understand the breakdowns of all the problems. The other thing I would say, the fourth thing I would say is, now that your homocysteine is 5 to 6, I would say that it's on the low end. So I would be asking you, what supplements are you taking? And let's look at the genetic testing here, or let's look at our board to look a little bit more into homocysteine. So homocysteine is right here, and it should be between 7 to 9. So right now, you were at 8 before in 2008. Now you're at 5 to 6, and you're saying, okay, I don't have to worry about my clotting problems anymore because I'm at 5 to 6. And again, I already explained that I don't think that there's a one-to-one relationship with high homocysteine and increased clotting. There is a relationship between high homocysteine and increased inflammation and oxidative stress and cardiovascular events, but not necessarily clotting per se. You could have plaquing. Maybe you're saying plaquing, but when I think of clotting, I think of a different process. I think about factor V Leiden, factor 2, an imbalance between clot formation and clot breakdown, infections, inflammation, but not necessarily that homocysteine thing. But here's where it's really important. So one of the reasons we could have low homocysteine is because we have really bad protein absorption. So number one, if someone is a vegan, they may not be eating any protein. Homocysteine is a breakdown product of protein. So if we're just not eating enough protein, our homocysteine could be really, really low. Another reason could be is we're eating a lot of protein, but we have decreased hydrochloric acid. And that's probably more often the case than anything else. And why would we have low hydrochloric acid? Because if we have a hypothyroid problem, if we have a H. pylori infection, if we have biofilms, if we eat really highly treated and highly chemical and highly processed and highly synthetic and highly GMO'd foods, what's happening is you are burning through your HCl reserves and you're not able to disinfect that food, and it's sitting there and it's rotting and it's fermenting and it's creating leaky and permeable membranes in your gut lining. It's causing infections, it causes biofilms. You don't absorb your B vitamins, you don't absorb your protein, you don't absorb your iron, and you're going to have potentially low homocysteine. But now when we start to talk about MTHFR, because you did mention, and I haven't mentioned that yet, you have an MTHFR problem and it's plus plus. So what does the relationship have to do between having an MTHFR problem and having potentially high homocysteine? What happens is MTHFR is basically creating folate from folic acid. And then folate is combining with homocysteine to produce methionine. So if we have a problem right here with an MTHFR problem, then you are not making enough folate, and then folate is not going to be able to get around to methionine. As a result, homocysteine is going to climb. So there definitely is a relationship between methylfolate or MTHFR and having high homocysteine. But again, you could have that problem where you have infections, gastrointestinal inflammation, decreased hydrochloric acid, and not absorbing your proteins, and MTHFR, which is causing your already low homocysteine to go a little bit higher because methylfolate is not, it's being pulled in two directions. In one direction, it's being pulled down, there's not enough of it. In the other direction, it's being pulled up, it's not recycling around, and it's not able to be lowered. But again, it's 8, so I would want to see a methylation profile. The other reason why potentially I see a lot of homocysteine levels go low, and when I say low, I mean I usually see 5, 4, 6, 5.2, 4.3, is because what happens is it isn't recycling around. It's just being pulled down. So why would it be pulled down? Why would glutathione, or why would homocysteine be pulled down? The reason it is because we have lots of reactive oxidative species, meaning we have a lot of free radicals. We have exposures to chemicals. We have heavy metals. We have pesticides. We have sprays. We have Roundup. We have, even organophosphates, plastics, phthalates, estrogen disruptors. There's so many things that you could possibly have. You have mycotoxins. You can have mercury, pathogens, parasites, bacteria. And when all of those things are huge, then what happens is it creates a demand to produce glutathione. And glutathione is directly produced from homocysteine. So your body, basically in effect, says, hey, let's put the brakes on using homocysteine to, make energy and repair our DNA and make our hormones and our neurotransmitters and rebuild our cells. Let's use it to make glutathione to produce a balance between all this free radical buildup that our cells are doing, which is typically a good thing. We want free radicals to break open cell walls and fight off intruders and eliminate them from the body. But if you are constantly doing that and you don't have your firefighters on board to be able to squench or squall or put out the excess free radical damage, you're going to have a lot of oxidized cells. So that could produce brain fog, muscle and joint pains, premature aging, wrinkles, gray hairs, constantly feeling like you're worn out, another exposure, like sort of a reactivation of a virus, a herpes outbreak, a shingles outbreak, red blood cells that are bursting because glutathione protects red blood cells too, and so now we get anemic and we don't have iron, and it just becomes sort of this feed-forwarding problem where homocysteine is going to be low, and that's what I get concerned about is, why is your homocysteine 5 to 6 now? I don't think that's better than when it was at 8, when it was at 8 in 2008, and I wouldn't be asking, okay, what adrenal supplements should I be avoiding? Where do adrenals fit in again? Well, the more stress we have, the more demand we put on these cycles to go really, really fast. So if I'm stressed out, if I have relationship issues, if I have a major trauma, if I have, work situation, whatever it is, I'm going to ask my cycle to increase itself, thereby even depleting my nutrients even further. So there's a lot of questions in this, a lot of answers and questions to your question, Kathy, in terms of, I just felt like I had to produce a Facebook Live because you asked so many things that needed to be addressed. Like you were at 8.0 in 2008, and now it's at 5 to 6, and you don't think you're at risk for clotting. That just needed to be addressed, and I would want to know what supplements are you taking. As far as pregnenolone goes, it could be a great supplement for those that aren't absorbing healthy fats, those that have done a Dutch test, and we look at the enzymes that may be upregulated or downregulated. We look at phase 1 and phase 2. We look at your genetic testing to see which enzymes aren't working quite well. I want to know if you're digesting and absorbing your foods. I want to know those things, and so it's hard to answer that question. I hope I didn't make your head spin and think, oh my goodness, you just sort of made me more confused than I was before. Hey, Stephen, I hope you're doing well. Never over 7.0. You tell them, Dr. Joel. So never over 7.0? I don't know. I mean, I've seen research. Are you saying it shouldn't be 6.0? 7.0 to 9 is what I've seen to be good. But again, I'd want to see a methylation profile. I'd want to see, and actually, that brings up a good point. I would want to know what the actual SAM-SAW ratio is. So SAM-E to SAW. That is the better indicator of methylation issues than what your homocysteine levels are. Because again, homocysteine levels could be pulled in two directions. You're not absorbing proteins, you're a vegan, you have a secondary gastrointestinal inflammation, and you're not secreting enough hydrochloric acid. Whatever it may be, it's pulling it down, and you're gonna have low homocysteine. On top of that, you may have massive reactive oxidative species, and you're having to use those that homocysteine to produce glutathione. On the other hand, you may have an MTHFR issue, you have a major infection, you have a B12 issue, and that's causing your homocysteine levels to go high. So you're being pulled in terms of it's high in one area, it's low in another area, it looks like it's normalized, and we have no idea where it is. That's where SAM to SAW comes into play. So SAM-E is the biggest methyl donor in the body. It's kind of like the mayor of the town. It decides, okay, I'm going to give a methyl group to my platelets and to my hair and to my skin to regenerate my DNA. I got to make more immunoglobulins. I got to be able to make more neurotransmitters. It basically helps with recycling your DNA. Or I got to fight off an infection and make more glutathione, or I got to make dopamine and adrenaline and epinephrine to deal with stressors, or I got to make serotonin. What am I going to do with it? But if you are not recycling your SAM-E because of no homocysteine, it's being pulled down, it's being blocked, it's not spinning, then all of a sudden your SAM is going to go down and your SAW is going to go up. And when SAW levels go high, that becomes a huge problem, because it's kind of like the example I use is you can take SAM-E and you may feel good in the very beginning and it's helping you, but then eventually, because this is not recycling down and SAM-E is not being regenerated, SAM-E turns into SAW and SAW can't go anywhere. And so it's like spent SAM. So the example I use is like a spent shell casing. It's used up. And as a result, it doesn't get cleared, it doesn't get detoxified. It's like a carbon monoxide versus carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide will preferentially bind to your receptors, and you can't get carbon dioxide, out of the blood, and it builds up and you die. It's not the same thing in terms of when SAW is produced, but it's the same thing in terms of SAW has a higher affinity to your cells, and all of your methyltransferase enzymes, SHMT, BHMT, PEMT, GAMT, COMT, PNMT, any enzyme that ends in MT needs SAM-E. And all those enzymes are not going to get this cofactor of SAM-E because you have so much SAW saws that spent shell casing. The example I use, it's kind of like a coin that you put in a coin machine. It's like a slug, and it gets blocked. It gets stuck in the slot. So now you can't put any other tokens in there, and that game can't be played. That's kind of what happens. So to answer your question, Kathy, in terms of it's at 8.0, and that's at 5 to 6.0, what's going on with my methylation, I'd be saying do a SAM to SAW ratio test. And the best test that I like to do that is called the Health Diagnostic Research Institute. And we need those for very, very difficult cases. Obviously, I'd want to see your genetic profile. Too many people tell me I have MTHFR, I'm taking methylfolate, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Or the other thing I hear is, I don't have MTHFR, I don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's ridiculous too, because there's so many other things besides the MTHFR in way of cofactors, in way of stressors, in way of inhibitors that slow the gene down, in way of promoters that speed it up, enzymes that aren't working good after MTHFR, enzymes that aren't working well before MTHFR. So just because you don't have an MTHFR, or just because you have MTHFR and you're taking homocysteine or methylfolate, there's so many other things that you need to be looking at. So anyways, I know I rifled a lot of that off. If there's any questions, I'd love to answer them right now. Let me know. But I think that that there was a bit of an explanation that was needed, because there's a lot of wrong sort of connections between homocysteine. I thought homocysteine, it being the sole judger if your methylation's working. It's not. It's a good one, like if you're at 2 or you're at 15, I know there's a methylation issue. And that's the thing, like I've said this many times before, when you have a high hormone and a low hormone, typically it leads to the same problem. Or if you have a high substrate or a low substrate, it leads to the same problem in terms of there's a methylation problem. If my homocysteine levels are high, something's not working properly. If my homocysteines are low, something's not working properly. So you just kind of have to figure out what it is. Is it an absorption issue? Is it a recycling issue? Is it a infectious issue? Is it a stress issue? Is it a cofactor issue? Is it a major environmental toxic issue? Is it another enzyme down the road that's causing problems? So many things that you really, really need to think of. So, Lori, you said, what do I eat, especially with Hashimoto's thyroiditis? I mean, that comes down to, good quality food, things that look like Mother Nature made it, things that don't require you putting in the microwave or, opening up a bag, or having synthetic, having artificial, having hormone treated, having sprays and chemicals. So that's number one. Number two, making sure that it has good quality nutrients in there in terms of is there good vitamins and minerals, making sure that you're getting good healthy fats. One of the things that we see to be a huge problem is the trans fats. And hey, I'm going to tell you in on a little secret. Whole Foods makes a lot of yummy foods, no doubt, but 80%, and I think this is, I hope it's changed, but you may want to do your research. 80% of their cooked foods are made with vegetable oil. And vegetable oil, another name for vegetable oil is rapeseed oil. And that's really great for your table, to shine your table and make it look really nice. But it's terrible for us. It's typically hydrogenated, and they put, if you ever smell rapeseed oil, they put odorless, they put disinfectants in there or things to take away the smell. And now all of a sudden you're getting a terrible oil, and that's creating problems with your cell membranes. It's causing your fluidity of your membranes to get stiff, and then bacterias, when they try to get into your cell membrane, they can do it. When your membranes are nice and flexible and lubricated and healthy, it can repel or not allow those critters and pathogens and viruses and parasites and pesticides to get into that cell and crystallize it and break it. So be real careful with your oils too. Really, really careful. Trans fatty oils, vegetable oils. Look at your food sources and look at whether or not you're getting digestive support with each meal too. We really look at hydrochloric acid as being a huge problem in terms of we don't have any, and you need that hydrochloric acid to support your own digestive processes. So anyways, what can you recommend for reading to learn more about HCl supplementation? It's a good question. I'm trying to think about what you could read. There's a lot of studies. I'll try to find that out, Kim. There's a study that talks about I'll have to find out what the resources are, but it's basically says that each cell has about 3 million methyl groups in its lifetime, and when you cook your food at high temperatures, which we do, you burn through 1,800 methyl groups. And when you cook your food at low temperature foods, or low temperature lower than the boiling point, 212, or you eat raw foods, it's 1,200 methyl groups. So you're saving yourself 600 methyl groups, which is a third of what you use up. So we really say a third of your life can be spared by eating healthy foods, or at least having some hydrochloric acid, because by the time we get to 30 and 40, we've already burnt through our HCl reserves, and now you're not able to digest that food. So I don't know where you can research it, because the antacid groups and the proton pump inhibitor groups, they don't want you to read about the fact that you don't need these antacids, because it takes away from their bottom dollar. I guess that's all I could say to that. So anyways, I hope you guys found that helpful. I hope that watch this video over and over and over again. There's lots of information in here that you can go over and learn and get useful pieces of information for. And any questions that you have, please let me know, and I will try to answer them directly. Hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Thanks so much.